Hey everybody, thank you for joining. I see people are starting to stream in. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. We'll give some people time to join. We're very excited to have you here today. My name's Evan. I work with the BuzzSumo team on the customer success side of the business. And then I'll have Brian introduce himself. We have Brian from Backlinko here with us.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Brian Dean here from Backlinko and Exploding Topics. And yeah, I'm excited, Evan, to be here. Thanks for inviting me. We're going to go over a cool industry study that BuzzSumo and I teamed up on. And BuzzSumo has just an insane data set for these kind of studies. So they were able to dig into their huge data set of content and how content performs and pull out content that has been evergreen, and figure out why. Why is this content evergreen and other stuff not evergreen? And more importantly, how can you create a content that's evergreen? So how can you publish something that months and years down the line will continue to bring in traffic? Well, that's exactly what we're going to cover in this webinar with 9 actionable things that you can do to make sure you're going to get more mileage out of your content in the future.
Great. Yeah, we're really excited. It's like if you would take industry knowledge like Brian has and combine it with big sets of data, you can do some really cool things with it. So we're still seeing some people join in. Let's hang out for a minute or two until we see that number stabilize a bit.
You can go ahead, Evan, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah. So for those of you who are just joining, my name's Evan. I head up customer success for BuzzSumo. So I've been at BuzzSumo for a couple of years. I've been working with social data for 4 years now. So I just love kind of in my hands of social data, talking about engagement, talking about content marketing and PR.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm Brian Dean, the founder of Backlinko and the co-founder of Exploding Topics. And yeah, I published a ton of content. I try to publish evergreen stuff. So I feel like I picked up some things over the years, and this industry study helped bring some data to some things I was doing and also surprised me. And I learned a lot of new stuff that I didn't expect from this research and things that I plan on incorporating into my content marketing. So I think you all will get a lot of value from this webinar because you're going to learn not only the tactical things I've done to make sure my content gets traffic and links and engagement and social shares over time, but some new things I'm going to be doing based on the results of this industry study. So yeah.
And we're really excited to have Brian. Not only is he a great guy and someone who has just a ton of knowledge in the content marketing space, but he is also excellent at creating evergreen content. So if I can brag on his behalf, we did this report. We looked at millions and millions of posts. He had 5 times his evergreen score was 5 times higher than everyone else in the content marketing, or should say than the average in the content marketing space. And he actually wrote the 6th highest piece of content in the B2B space by looking at evergreen score overall. And you're a definitive guide to SEO. So you're definitely someone who talks the talk and walks the walk there.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That was interesting. I mean, that one's not even that old, so that I hopefully will be number 1 someday. Now I'm motivated to get that number up. 162. Those are rookie numbers. So like Matthew McConaughey said. So I need to get that up. And actually, the secret, if you can call it that, behind this one was first, you're going to see a lot of the tactics that we talk about in this webinar and I've used that in this guide. Some of it was on purpose and some of it I just happened to do the right thing. But one thing right off the bat I want to share with you is that if I just published this guide and left it, it probably wouldn't have that high of an evergreen score because it's all about SEO in 1 year. And it seems unlikely that would have a high evergreen score. But first, I didn't focus too much on these like micro trends, a Google update. It was long-term stuff that's likely to continue over time. I think I first published this in 2019. So I update the same post every year with a big update, but a lot of the content stays the same or is just tweaked because I'm not focusing on these very small Google updates that happen every month or two, the core updates that happen all the time. Instead, I'm going with the big picture stuff. What are the bigger trends in SEO to keep an eye on rather than chasing updates? So even though it's about SEO, it's still relatively evergreen because it's things that will still be relevant 6 months to a year from now.
Well, we'll talk more about evergreen content in the SEO space, particularly later on. And the spoiler there is it typically doesn't do well because it tends to be so focused on things that change quickly.
Yeah, which is it's important to have that part, but yeah, we kind of got ahead of ourselves a little with defining evergreen content. But yeah, I mean, there's no definition. I actually did some research to see different definitions of evergreen content, and they're all more or less on the same page, and everyone has their own definition. You can feel free to put your definition in the chat if you want to share what you think evergreen content is from your experience of working in the content marketing world. In my experience, evergreen content is content that continues to perform over time. So we're talking months and years instead of days or weeks. So for me, it's just a time frame difference. And that the caveat there is that a lot of people will say, well, evergreen content is something you publish, you never touch it again, and it still brings in all that stuff over time. And I think that that can be true, and that's true for a lot of evergreen content. But I think it's okay if you need to give it a little touch up every now and again to keep it up to date. It still counts as evergreen content if the content is basically the same. If you have to go back and rewrite it from scratch every year, no, that's not it. But if you have to go in and maybe change a screenshot, change a step in a process, or maybe you're in the health space, you need to, add a new study that just came out, it still counts as evergreen content if you're only giving it a little bit of update. If you're overhauling it, it's different. So basically, if you're publishing something, you're like, I want this to rank 2 years from now, I want to get traffic 2 years from now. That's the type of stuff we're talking about in this webinar. And another study I did a couple of years ago just looked at B2B content, and we found that evergreen content outperformed newsworthy stuff like 10 to 1. So all those people that are publishing newsworthy stuff in the B2B space, clickbait stuff, they're loving it for like a day. But I call that treadmill traffic because you have to keep publishing it all the time to get that traffic in, versus evergreen content. You publish it, it's going to bring you dividends for years. So I'm a big fan of evergreen content myself, and I basically only try to publish evergreen content whenever possible.
That's amazing to hear. 2 quick items of housekeeping I realized I did not mention at the beginning of the call. One is that, yes, this is being recorded. We will make sure we send the recording out to you in the coming days. The second one is, if you have any questions for us, you pop them in the Q&A box at the end of the screen. We'll save some time for Q&A. We'll try to get to as much as we can. We can't promise we get to everything, but we'll make sure we save some time towards the end of the call there.
All right, Evan, I think I'm ready.
All right, well, let's go with the poll. So the first thing we're going to ask you about, because we're curious, is how often do you think about evergreen score? How much of your strategy is dedicated to creating evergreen content? So I'll give you guys a couple seconds to vote here, and then we can just talk about the results quickly.
Oh, I tried to vote, won't let me vote. I guess because I'm a ringer. I guess I'm a ringer as a panelist. But
you're absolutely a ringer.
While people submit that, I'll just give my answer then. It's definitely 75% or more. I would say almost 100%. There's a couple posts that come to mind that I kind of have tried to hop on a trend a little bit, and it never really works out over the long term. I'm publishing, it's got me a little bit of traffic over the short term, but over the long term, it just wasn't really worth it. So I'm a big fan of evergreen content and then updating that evergreen content. So for me, it's 75% plus, and based on the results, Evan, it looks like people are really into evergreen stuff.
Yeah, I think it's the case. It's interesting to see like a very even split between the 25, 50, and 75. It's definitely a broad range of opinions in the room. I guess it's a question of is it part of your strategy now? Do you want to be more part of your strategy and going in the future? Feel free to put those type of questions in the chat. There's one of those things that you want to do better, but you feel like you can get there, or is thing you just don't think about too much.
Yep. Yeah. And in this webinar, if you're only doing 50%, or you're only doing, 25%, or you're doing 75%, you're going to learn how to get more out of the evergreen stuff you're putting out. So no matter what percentage you're doing now, hopefully with this webinar, we're going to help you get more mileage out of the content you're creating. So it's not about the percentage, because there's a place for non-evergreen content. I mean, BuzzFeed has built an empire with non-evergreen content, but for most people, especially in B2B, evergreen is where it's at.
So let's dive into the data then.
Yeah, let's dive into the results. Good idea.
Oh, let's go a little ahead of myself. There we go. So this is the first one we had up there. And we found the articles with 20 or 2021, their titles actually had higher evergreen scores compared to previous years. And so I'm just kind of curious to get your take on the data here and what you think about it.
So at first I was surprised. I was like, wait, you think putting the year in the title is literally dating your content. You're literally saying this is for this year. So how is it possible that adding a year or having a year in your title would make something more evergreen? There's 2 theories that I have here. The first is that when an article has a year in a title, it doesn't necessarily mean that article came out that year. That could just represent the fact that it was updated that year. Like the SEO guide you showed earlier, I first published that in 2019 or 2018, but it has 2021 in the title now. Doesn't mean I published it then, but I published it years ago. But I add the date every time I update it. And tons of people do that. I'm not the only one. I didn't invent this strategy at all. So I think part of it is that people are updating their content and adding the year to it when they do. And those tend to be evergreen content with high evergreen scores. It's basically a way for people to show off and say, I updated this. It's relevant for right now. And it's reflected in the evergreen score that people are continually going back, updating, improving, checking out their old content over time. But what's really interesting is that you see in 20 and 2021, those years are way higher in terms of evergreen scores compared to previous years. So it's something about those years are special. I wonder what. Seemed pretty normal to me. I don't know. Seemed like a pretty average ho-hum 2020. But I think it's just because there's two reasons. One is this a really interesting analysis of that BuzzSumo did that just looked at there's more content came out in 2020 than previous years. So there's just more content. There's more chances for content to have a high evergreen score. And people were just sitting around for a lot of the year, reading stuff online, doom scrolling on their phone. And there's just more content to check out. So it makes sense that more content would equal higher evergreen scores. There's also the fact that just things have changed so much. It could be that people sort of have a line in the sand that anything that was published before 2020, if I can't tell it was published after 2020, I'm going to completely disregard it. So it could be that having the year in the title now is much more powerful than it was in 2016, because in 2016, you're just saying this is relevant to this year. But by putting 2020 or 2021, you're saying this is relevant to this crazy world we're living in now. So I think that's also could be a big part of why those years tend to work better in terms of a high evergreen score.
It's interesting. And something I thought was kind of interesting looking at the data about the years as well is that it depends on how we define evergreen. Like there's a long runway of you can say, no, our content's going to keep generating engagement after that initial burst of virality, like through the next 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. I think that kind of dovetails in with your talking about updating content. But if you write content about 2021 in January, it's not like you're writing something about clickbaity about news title. You have a whole year to get that content going, to get people engaging with it too, and you can keep updating it.
That's a good point. I mean, I didn't even think about that. I mean, some of the content that I like the SEO guide, I actually published that the year before. I usually publish it in October, November. So actually that has a year of runway that starts in 2020, even though it's about 2021, because it's all about looking forward. And a lot of the content that we publish at Exploding Topics is about trends. So sometimes we put in the title tag like 2022, 2023, because we're looking at the future, right? So in that case, there are probably use cases for trends and things that are looking forward that would have their, they better get a lot of mileage out of it. Like you said, a year, 6 months at least.
Makes sense. You're building that runway in to the title.
Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah, that was our finding. Now we also looked, Evan, you can intro it because you know
go for it.
Oh, so the team at BuzzSumo, they also looked at different topics that were covered and which ones tended to have the highest overall evergreen score. So which ones tended to have an average evergreen score compared to other verticals. And what was really interesting is that a few that you would expect are at the top and a few that you wouldn't are at the top. But what I'm going to explain to you, it'll make sense. So health is at the top. That makes total sense. I mean, health does change. There's, keto, carnivore diet. There's all sorts of crazy stuff people are doing, not sleeping. But I don't know if they're doing that actually. But health is something that shouldn't really change. The fundamentals of what makes you healthy and what people search for as it relates to health is pretty consistent. People want to lose weight. People want to build muscle. People want bigger arms, right? It's the same stuff. And how do you get that? You sleep, you eat healthy, and you exercise. So there are some changes within that, but for the most part, it doesn't really change that much. So that makes sense. Same thing with travel. There are some trends with travel. People go to Santorini, Greece more than they used to. But for the most part, people want to sit in a nice beach on vacation. They want to see an old town in Europe. There's, of course, trends in these things, but for the most part, they stay the same. It's not like there's a new transportation method invented or a new country that people found to visit. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you have SEO being the worst, along with the ones that basically amounted to zero. That makes sense because most SEO content is about the here and now, the latest Google update, this hack you can do to increase your Google rankings. And it makes sense that it would have a low evergreen score. There's a place for that stuff because people want to know, like the news, keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening. But for a blog like mine, I don't really talk about that stuff. I'm all about what you can do to get rankings over the long term. So my stuff tends to be more evergreen, but it makes sense that SEO would be, one of the lower evergreen scores on average. Then you have digital marketing and content marketing at the top, which at first you might say, that's weird. Those seem like SEO where they're always changing. But if you think about it, they don't really change that much, right? There's no like content marketing update. There's that like wipes out a bunch of blog posts. There's no Twitter. You never read about like a Twitter update that just kills a bunch of people's Twitter profiles. There's no like new Twitter optimization tool that comes out. It doesn't really change that much. Of course, there's some long-term trends like infographics kind of going boop, video going up. There's some new, Clubhouse and some apps and stuff. But if you compare it to SEO, it really doesn't change that much. And digital marketing being so broad, it changes even less, right? The channels that people are using now are the same channels they've been using forever. Email, SEO, content marketing, social media, PR. It's the same stuff. Tactics change, but a piece of content about digital marketing, how to get more leads, how to get more customers, if it was really good and designed to be evergreen from the start, will likely be evergreen over time. So this is interesting. If you're in any of these niches, you can look at this as like a threat or an opportunity, because if you're an SEO like me, you say, wow, I can publish more evergreen stuff and stand out because no one's publishing evergreen stuff in my space, right? And if you're in the digital marketing space, everyone's talking about these long-term things. Maybe you can hop in and mix in with your evergreen some stuff that's about right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, we mentioned it before, that you had the sixth highest ranking piece of B2B content. And it was about, as far as evergreen score, and it was about SEO. And I think it's interesting because you kind of laid out a pretty good roadmap that if someone's in a space that doesn't really generate evergreen content, typically that kind of gets stuck in that news cycle of what's changing quickly, that if you kind of take that fundamentals approach, which is what you did, and talk about long-term fundamentals, that you can take that path to generating evergreen content. You just have to be thoughtful about it. Is that fair to say? Is that part of your
definitely approach? The trick is people don't want, like, you have to give them like a Mary Poppins. You got to give them a spoonful of sugar to help the medicine go down. You can't say this is like 5 fundamentals of marketing that'll be relevant in 5 years. No one wants to hear that. They all wants to hear what's now, what's next. So you have to frame it in a what's next framework. So that's what I do with these SEO annual guides that I put out. I have a content marketing one too that I do every year. And it's basically, these are the longer term things to keep an eye on. So it touches on trends and it focuses on the future, but it's still relatively evergreen because it's not something that if someone read it 2 months from now, it would be completely out of date and useless. That's really the key to producing evergreen stuff in many ways. Not everything, because we have a lot more to cover in this webinar that pertain to how to create evergreen content. But a big part of it is your strategy from scratch. And I think that's why we're starting off with these two, is figuring out what is your evergreen strategy going to look like. And in my opinion, it's always to do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. So in health, everyone's doing evergreen stuff. It looks like maybe you want to have evergreen as your foundation, but try some stuff about a new study that just came out yesterday. Try to do some more newsworthy stuff. Try to do some like Elon Musk, what he tweeted about yesterday, if it related to health and fitness. So yeah, this is just something, if you're in these verticals, interesting information to see how your competition's doing.
Perfect. And I think it's time for another poll. So let me get it launched up in a second. And this is something we talked about because we have some data behind it. We won't spoil it now, but we're curious what people's thoughts are going into this. Which social media channels do you think are more conducive to evergreen content? Where do you think engagement is going to be more evergreen? So we'll let this run for a few more seconds. And we're definitely curious.
Evan, someone brought up, we didn't look at this, but someone brought up to me when they read the study about YouTube and how that, if we didn't analyze that because they're not articles or blog posts, but I feel like that would be pretty evergreen. Some of their stuff. I mean, I watched a video today, this hilarious video that was like 5 years old. So videos can get a lot of traction on there.
That's interesting. I think we have a follow-up study in the works, it sounds like.
Oh yeah, I think so. Because YouTube is really its own animal, because it's like content and a platform in one, versus these we're looking at here. People share content from other places there. But anyway, if you want to reveal the results.
Yeah, let's do it. So before let's actually spoil the the data too. Let me go back a slide. But these are the results. Curious what your thoughts are there, Brian.
Well, I was surprised because we saw that most people are on the webinar are saying Pinterest should be the most evergreen. And that would have been my vote too, because I don't spend a ton of time on Pinterest. It's not really my thing, but the time I have spent on there, it seems like evergreen stuff. But to people I've talked to who spend more time on Pinterest, they told me it's actually the opposite, that it's all about trends, fashion trends, design trends. Everything there is all about trends. So it makes sense that something on Pinterest that wouldn't do well over the long term. Even recipes, those tend to come and go. Like everyone's making apple cobbler one year and then it kind of fades, whatever. So there's people that are more knowledgeable about Pinterest were telling me that, yeah, there's some evergreen stuff in there, but for the most part, it's like fashion trends, very trendy stuff. So it makes sense that it wouldn't be very evergreen, which was not my thought, because I would have voted Pinterest as well. What's interesting is that Reddit came out on top by far, like it crushed the others in terms of evergreen score. And there's two theories behind why this is that I have. The first is just it's a symptom of what does well in Reddit. Like if content does well in Reddit, it's more likely to be evergreen because those people aren't necessarily looking for like news unless they're on certain subreddits. For the most part, they're just looking for good content and this very niche thing they're interested in that subreddit. Versus Twitter or Facebook, it's very right now. They're very right now platforms, especially Twitter. You're on there to literally see what's happening at this moment. And there usually isn't like, a lot of content on there that's evergreen. It's stuff that will get a huge spike and then die. Facebook's very similar in that way. The other thing behind Reddit, besides the fact that the audience there might just be like more into seeing evergreen stuff in general, so they share it there, and that's why you have a higher evergreen score, could be that Reddit itself drives traffic to content over time. So I'm sure you've searched for something, especially any weird long tail keywords that you search for. They might have brought traffic. The Reddit threads bring traffic to content over time. This is something that a reader on LinkedIn brought up, Chris, as you can see here. He brought up the fact that it may not just be a symptom of the network itself. It could be a cause that people are searching for stuff on Reddit. They land on the subreddit, which tends to rank very well. And then they go to that content. So it's actually driving content to that traffic over the long term. That makes total sense because I'm sure we've all searched for weird stuff and Reddit results are everywhere and you click on it and then you go to somewhere else. So yeah, that's really interesting, but it does make sense when you think about it.
Yeah, I think it does. I think we've all gone to Reddit through Google to try to find the right answers.
1,000 times. The weirder the keyword, the more likely it is to bring up Reddit. But they nail those like ridiculous long tail terms. And a lot of times it's someone sharing like for more information. I read this, like a lot of troubleshooting stuff is on Reddit. Like I couldn't figure out how to do something. And then someone's like, here's a full tutorial. Here's a full help section. That's sending traffic to a piece of content that might be a little bit old. So it's increasing the evergreen score.
Perfect. Let's jump ahead. And just to point out, we talked about this already, but the audience hit the nail on the head here. And then I think Twitter was the lowest ranked one here. And we didn't quite hit Pinterest, but you guys are on the ball that Twitter is not the best place to generate evergreen content. And next up, we have a breakdown by content types. And I think we all kind of thought this was interesting too. And Brian, what was your take when you first saw this?
Well, my take was that it seems surprising that the best of anything, because it seems like that would change a lot, would be evergreen. But those are, again, things that tend to be updated quite often. And some of them can be just evergreen without being touched again. Like if you're going to do like the best places to visit in Western Europe, is that really going to change from year to year? Probably not, right? It's going to be Paris, London, Madrid, Lisbon, whatever. It's going to be the same places. Those usually don't change that much. So it makes sense that they would be evergreen. Even if you rank products, as long as they're not super high tech, they're also likely to remain evergreen over time. And if they get updated, even better. So what I would put best in guide in sort of the same category. Guides are the same way. If you're producing a guide on how to do something, unless it's tactical to the point of like, click this, do that, it's going to remain evergreen over time. And then you have a bunch that are all kind of similar, right? You have, right, Evan, you have like 3 through 7 are all the same idea. They're all data-driven pieces of content. They're all about either finding data, collecting data, generating data, and publishing stuff about data that's scientific and usually in the form of an industry study for our purposes. And those tend to be really evergreen too, which again, at first blush might seem surprising, but as someone that's published a ton of industry studies in B2B, I can tell you that they're surprisingly evergreen. I mean, I have some of these studies I published like 4 years ago. They're relevant, I'm sure, in some way, but people just want to cite them. They want to share them. They want to cite the statistic. And I'm still the only one that's, published a study on it. Like one we did a couple of years ago on, Google click-through rate, and how many people click on number one versus number three, how many people go to the second page. I'm sure some of that has changed since we published it. It's like 3 years old, but it's still, I don't even know from where people find it. They share it. They come to it from Google, they link to it. So it ends up being surprisingly evergreen, which is important because these industry studies are super hard to pull off and often expensive, especially if you're doing it yourself, and especially compared to like a list post. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind, that these industry studies, I know BuzzSumo, you guys publish a ton of these and push your readers to publish them because they can work so well. It's also encouraging to see that these aren't flash in the pan results you're going to get from them. These are things that can last over time. And then at the bottom of the list, that was also interesting because that tends to be the bottom three are a little bit of the clickbaity type of stuff, right? Like the truth about X, which is always ironic because the truth about whatever is usually the opposite, right? It just tends to be clickbaity stuff, or the impact of this thing, this news thing, have impact on whatever, and 5 questions for someone in the news. Like they just tend to be very clickbaity. And I'm sure there's, like we said already a couple of times, there's a place for non-evergreen content, and it's okay to have that as part of your mix. But if you want to focus on evergreen, which I would recommend you do because you're going to get the best ROI from your content over the long term, I always stick to the top of the list. And it basically are best of posts, so best of lists. Then you have guides, which are more or less best of strategies in one place, and then industry studies. If you focus on that stuff, and that's basically all I publish at Backlinko, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah, perfect. And here's just a quick example of content that if you looked at it at first, you might not think that it'd be really ranking so well with an evergreen score that'd be seeing traffic over time. But at first glance, this type of content, you keep it updated. If you keep it updated, like you're going to see that engagement come through over time.
Yeah, for sure. And even if you update it once every 18 months, it doesn't change that fast. So that's a beautiful thing about evergreen content. You usually don't need to touch it that much. And this is an example. I'm sure home decor stuff changes, but like you said, Evan, you just got to update it a little bit and it's probably good to go.
Perfect. Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out a couple other post types that have a high likelihood of becoming evergreen. Again, before we're analyzing titles, this would be the structure of the post itself. I'm curious what you think about this one, Brian.
So yeah, it's interesting to see lists. A lot of people that read the study when it first came out were surprised by that because they're like, listicles, those are like those are newsworthy or clickbaity, and they don't get a good, they're not really designed for evergreen. But honestly, if you look for any how-to post, how-to keyword, they either bring up list posts or how-to posts themselves. So how to do whatever, a lot of times it's 17 ways to do that thing or how to do that thing. And how-to posts are the most popular type of content you're going to find, or just people want how-to stuff. So that's going to get you along a pretty solid evergreen score if it's good, because people always want to know how to do that thing over time. And they're going to keep searching for it. They're going to keep finding it. They're going to keep sharing it. They're going to keep linking to it, which increases that evergreen score. And then at the bottom, you have infographics, which, those tend to be more of a thing on something that's happening right now. And they kind of are fading in general. Then you have press releases, which makes total sense because those are literally designed to be about right now, right? Those are like, this thing just happened today. So it makes sense that those would have a really bad evergreen score. And then presentations, I was a little bit surprised. That could be, I'd like to hear your take, Evan. It could just be that presentations in general just don't get a lot of shares. So they just don't even have, they're not even a blip on the radar when it comes to evergreen.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think presentation, especially if they're just a quick recordings or something like that, or transcripts from a conference, let's say, like you're not going to get a lot of shares in general. But I think it's interesting. We could probably break it down more by looking at it. Or we open up the data, anybody go and BuzzSumo, take a look. A lot of them might be like, when I go to presentations and conferences, people like to talk about what's happening right now in a lot of
Yeah.
cases too. So I think they're highly relevant in some cases for a short amount of time, and they don't have that staying power.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I've gone to a lot of conferences and know everyone's like the next thing. It's all about right now. So it's a good point. They tend to be more focused and they're not really designed to be evergreen.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a combination of those two
Yep.
things.
And you can't
what makes-
update them, right?
that's a really
So-
good point. You can update the wrapper, you can't update the presentation. So,
Yeah.
really interesting one was podcasts. You know, a lot of people are moving towards podcasts. It's a great growth avenue. But I think what's interesting, and Brian, love your take in a second too, though, is that if you're going to invest in setting up a podcast, you have to keep it going. You can't go back and edit it. To Brian's point about presentations, you have to keep that podcast going because people aren't going to want to go listen to an episode from 2 years ago necessarily. They want to hear the latest episode.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's just human nature because I'm sure as content creators in this webinar, you're like, but that episode from 2 years ago is so good, like it's still irrelevant. And I'm the same way. Like I'm a content creator who likes to publish evergreen stuff. And even I won't listen to an episode that's 2 years old. Even if it was like the meaning of life, I'd be like, it's probably too old. So we just wanted to highlight podcasts just because they're such like a huge growing format, and that it doesn't have a bad evergreen score, but it doesn't have a good evergreen score. You know, it was lower than most text-based articles and interviews, which are most podcaster interviews anyway, had a similar evergreen score. So I'm like that. I don't really listen to older podcast episodes very often. So it just makes sense. It's not an evergreen medium. And it's why, like you said, Evan, you got to keep publishing new stuff. That's the only way people are going to see it. And if you just look at how podcast apps are designed, whether it's Spotify or the Apple podcast app, they're designed just to bubble up new episodes. It's actually not a good discovery platform. Like even if you use their like browse feature, it's just new shows that are popular, right? There isn't like a classics page or like a best of. It's usually newer stuff. So it's really hard to get your older podcast episodes to surface, which probably is one of the reasons that they're not very evergreen. And like you said, Evan, you can't edit them. So if something is out of date in the podcast, well, it's going to be out of date forever because you can't go back and change it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And next up, let's just look at some sites. And I got to give the caveat here that these are sites that publish more than 10,000 pieces of content. So you want to look at the big major publishers who are generating evergreen content. And Brian actually may not know this, but I have to put it in here that he outranks all these guys here. He just writes high quality content. He doesn't write 10,000 pieces of content in the last 4 years like everyone else here. I kind of curious to get your take on like how you see this list looking.
Well, I will actually, a lot of these findings, I was surprised. This is one where I wasn't surprised because these, especially at the top, these are publishers that I really associate with evergreen content, and they do a good mix. They publish evergreen content that still has that twist where it makes it like this is relevant to now, and that's how they're able to get all those shares that get them into this sort of winner circle in the first place. But like Social Media Examiner, their content is at first blush not very evergreen because it's like how to change your Facebook page name. That's something that's very tactical. They're going to be like, click here, click this, do this, blah, blah, blah. And that's going to change in like a month when Facebook changes their UI. But what they do is they keep that stuff up to date. They're always updating their content. So their stuff's really evergreen in the sense that when you land on it, it's going to be relevant for when you see it. It's very rare you'll see something that's really out of date on Social Media Examiner. That's one way. They're actually the first two are two good examples of different ways to tackle evergreen. Social Media Examiner is like, we'll try to be as evergreen as possible, but we'll understand that we need to go in and change screenshots all the time. They probably have someone just doing that all day. HBR, Harvard Business Review, they're the opposite. They're like, here's a case study about Home Depot. And here it is. Like, it may not be, if it's relevant, read it. If not, don't. Their stuff, you could read it 50 years from now, 100 years from now, and it would still be things you can take away from it to apply to your business. So it makes sense to me that HBR would be on there. Brain Pickings is sort of a mix between the two. She tends to publish a lot of content that are on studies and medical studies. But it's not like here's one study that found whatever. It's more of a collection of of research over time, and she synthesizes the information and puts it into an actionable guide that you can read. That's why the site is so popular. I'm surprised they published 10,000 posts, so it's kind of crazy. And then the bottom, you have like entrepreneur.com. They're super, they're like a news site essentially, right? They have some evergreen stuff, 5 ways to do whatever, but for the most part, it's very into the here and now. It's a news publisher, so it makes sense. Same thing with Search Engine Land. That site is all about they have some evergreen stuff. For the most part, it's a Google update. This Google person did this Google person said that. It's a lot of non-evergreen stuff. The surprising one here is history.com. You think they would have the best evergreen score of all time, but even they are, susceptible to publishing stuff that's related to the news, because they know people aren't going to read about Genghis Khan unless it relates to Paris Hilton or whatever, something that's happening now.
That's a
Because I've
good
seen their
point.
site, and they tend to tie it into current events a lot.
That's a good point. A lot of people ask questions, and we'll get to it later, about how do you tie in like that SEO strategy and try to capture the virality with Evergreen. So it's interesting. That's an interesting approach to it for sure.
Yep.
So we're going to digress a bit, and I think I see some questions in the chat about it too. So maybe we should have slipped this at the beginning. Is how can you find the Evergreen score? How are we calculating the Evergreen score? So we're doing this from BuzzSumo. It's data we have, and we have, I think, about 8 billion posts in our archive, 300 trillion engagements, and we use this data to run the study. You can get access to it. If you haven't used BuzzSumo, go to BuzzSumo.com, sign up for a free 30-day trial. There's no gotchas. We're not going to take your credit card or anything like that. You get your hands on the same data we used here. So what we do is we assign everything an Evergreen score. We start counting it after 30 days, and we weight the content and how it's going over time, but it's comparative numbers. We use it to compare content to each other, to other pieces of content, and we're going to tell you, how evergreen it is. How is it generating engagement over time? So if you're familiar with BuzzSumo at all, if not, it just takes a couple clicks in our web content analyzer. You can put a topic in this case, content strategy, and we're going to pull back all the content, our archives of content strategy. We can go back up to 5 years, and we're going to assign everything Evergreen score. You can sort by it. You export all this data and play with it, and really kind of take your own research into your own hands. We can also search by websites. It's a really cool tool. You want to just put your website in here, see how you're doing, see how evergreen your content is to your competitors. You can do that too. And again, all you do is sort by this Evergreen score column here. So that was the quick BuzzSumo portion of how to do everything in the platform. If any questions about finding it in BuzzSumo, just reach out to us at help@buzzsumo.com or reach out through the in-app chat. We're always happy to help you. So I promised we'd save some time for questions, and we definitely have some time. So a lot of people reached out with questions, which was awesome and amazing to see. We love that. I did try to group some of them together because I think I saw a couple of themes popping up. So I'll start with one for you, Brian. And that is, how do you come up with evergreen content ideas? Like, how do you approach it from the ideation stage?
I usually look at some of the longer term trends around the keywords. So it's all about the topic you choose. Not all about, as we saw, a big part of it is a topic you choose. So if you're going to choose a topic, let's say how to start a podcast, for example, that is for me an evergreen topic, because that's something that some of it will change. Maybe you use different software to upload the episodes, and maybe you use a different editor. But for the most part, starting a podcast, it's the same stuff. You need a microphone, you need an idea, you need a name, you need a cover art, you need some basic things to have in mind, some scripts, you need a website to host some of the episodes and show links and things of that nature. So that will always be the same. But if you're like, okay, I want to talk about how to start a podcast, but I want to focus on Descript, which is a popular editing tool for podcasts. That's not going to be as evergreen, because Descript could get bought by somebody tomorrow, and all of a sudden your guide is completely out of date. So this is something that I try to do at the topic level. And then from there, as I'm writing, I try to do a lot of the stuff that we learned about in the webinar, focus on lists, focus on guides and other formats that tend to do well over time, focus on numbers and data. So if I was doing something about how to start a podcast, I might do an industry study about why do certain podcasts take off? We analyzed podcasts that had, 1,000 downloads in their first week. Here's what they had in common, that sort of thing. That's going to tend to do well over time versus focusing on how to get started on Spotify or another one of these newfangled podcast apps. So yeah, the topic is the most important thing, because if you nail the topic and make sure that's evergreen, the rest is a lot easier. But you still want to make sure you're following the formats we covered here, and also keeping things up to date, and maybe even adding the year in the title to let everyone know, hey, this is updated and this is still relevant.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. And one thing I'll point out, just to plug BuzzSumo quickly, nothing wrong with going and looking at some high evergreen piece of content, get some inspiration, look how other people are doing it. If because Brian's not always here to give you his behind the scenes answer.
Well, for sure. I mean, that's what it's for. I mean, that feature is there for a reason. I use it too. I've been a paying BuzzSumo customer since like 2015 or something like that. So I still use the evergreen score because, like you said, if you're not sure if something's going to be evergreen, just see what else is out there on that topic. And if you notice nothing's evergreen, it's probably because that topic just can't, it's not possible to make it evergreen. So that's something that could be a good kind of check if you want to make sure that your topic has potential to be evergreen.
It's a good point. You don't want to start trying to write an evergreen celebrity gossip blog. It's probably not going to be successful.
Exactly.
A lot of questions are coming in, both during the chat and previously through email about SEO and evergreen score. And I think you probably brought that out to say about SEO and that initial virality versus evergreen score. Do you see there being trade-offs, or in one versus the other, and how do you kind of approach that?
There's definitely a trade-off. I mean, I've gotten to the point where there's different types of content for different purposes. And if you can nail it and like you do this magic where, publish a post that does everything, then that's great. And I've had that happen, but it's mostly been luck. For the most part, you want to produce content for different reasons. So one is for SEO. So you publish it and it's 100% to rank in Google. If it gets shared on Twitter, great. If not, who cares? Your goal is just to rank it on Google. Now, getting it shared on Twitter will help. But again, it's really hard to do both of those things. So for example, let's say some of the keywords I'm targeting is like, B2B SEO is a keyword that I targeted a few months ago. Is that something that's going to do well on Twitter? No, there's no hook there. There's nothing interesting there. It's just what B2B SEO is and how it's different than B2C SEO. It's great for someone searching for that keyword, and it's boring as hell to everybody else. So that is just to rank in Google. Then you have stuff that's meant to get shared on social media. Now, I don't do a ton of that, but most of the industry studies are designed to do that. They get a lot of social shares, like the one we just did with BuzzSumo. They got a lot of shares. They get a lot of that virality you're looking for. That's those have a place, that social traffic stuff. Other formats tend to do well. Visuals tend to do well for that, but not as well for Google. And then there are other pieces of content that are designed just to get links. So if you want backlinks, which you want, if you want to rank, those are usually statistics posts. They can be data that you created yourself, but they can be curated data from other places. So for me, I don't try to combine them that much because I've never had luck with that. And usually a piece of content that'll do great on one factor won't do well on the other. So for example, I publish a lot of stat pages at Backlinko to get links because journalists are looking for stats and they'll cite it. It's not going to do on social media, and it's not really going to rank for anything. It's just to get links. So I've just kind of put my content into 3 different buckets, all of which are evergreen, but they're just for different purposes.
That makes a lot of sense. There's no magic bullet, right? I think is a fair way to look at it. You got to do the work, and you got to be tactical about things. One last topic I want to make sure I touch on, because we got a ton of questions about it and different aspects of it, is updating content. And I'll kind of to lay out the land before we dive in. So a couple of questions came in around updating dates and articles, first updating URLs, or having the dates in the URLs, but also how to prioritize updating content. Like, is it something that you pre-plan, or do you kind of have a process of you look at content, see how it's performing, and decide if you want to update it?
So the URLs one easy. Don't put dates in the URL because it makes this process a lot harder later on. But if you do have a date in your URL and you want to update a piece of content, I would just keep the date in the URL. A lot of people will say you should change the URL and then 301 redirect that page to another. But in my experience, it's not worth it. And if you look at WordStream, back in the day, they used to publish a lot of stuff that had the date in the URL. And they just said, whatever, we're just going to keep updating and adding the year to the title and keep the URL the same. So the URL is like, 2017, how to get more Facebook followers. And the title tag's like 2021. It does fine. Nobody cares. No one notices. So I would not have the date in the URL, but if you have it, I would just roll with it. It's not worth, unless if you know SEO, I would get a new URL that doesn't have the date in it and redirect it. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't even do that. Don't bother. Now, in terms of updating the date, I've spent a ridiculous amount of time thinking about this. Basically, how I do it is if the piece of content has had a significant update, and how that's defined is up to you, but mostly in the form of text, not so much screenshots, then I allow myself to update the date. Now, in my case, I custom coded the site so it says last updated instead of just the published. So it changes the last updated date. Now, this is something that because I update my content so much, I had to build that in. A lot of CMSs support it, and there might even be WordPress plugins that have it because I know a lot of news sites and stuff have the last updated. And I've seen a lot of blogs even do that now. So I'd recommend adding that if you can to your site, changing published date to last updated. That way it's more transparent and you're not saying this was published on this day because it wasn't. It was just updated on this day. It's like a good balance between the two. And if I go back and I just change one thing or make a small tweak, I won't update the date or update anything. I'll just keep it the same. But if I go back and make a real concerted effort to change something, then yeah, then I'll go ahead and I'll update it and give it that new date.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And as far as the prioritization piece, what triggers you to go back and say, I want to update this? Is it just looking at, beforehand, it's kind of part of your pre-planning, or do you see that traffic coming over time and make a decision or fall off over time?
It's part of a process. I try to be more proactive, and usually every 6 months, someone from my team looks at the content to make sure nothing is completely out of date, like a dead link or a strategy that doesn't make sense, or maybe a step in a process that doesn't work anymore. And then every year I go through, and that's the advantage of not having 10,000 posts, go through each one and make sure they're up to date and change what I can change that makes sense. Usually, because like I said, I try to go evergreen from the start. It doesn't require that big of a change. And then I make a decision based on how much I change that post, whether to change the updated date or not. I would say half the time I do, half the time I don't. It really depends. And like I said, it's subjective anyway. There's no like Google algorithm says like this updated, this percentage, therefore it's okay to update the date. I really don't know. Google hasn't said anything about it. I bet you could just change the updated date without changing anything and it'd be fine. But I just like to stay on the safe side and just be more transparent. Say this was really updated versus this, change a broken link or something. That's not really worth saying this was updated.
That's really, really interesting. That's something that I think people can look at and apply. So we're a little bit over time. So I know we didn't get to everybody's question. We're gonna try to make sure we can answer them, as many of them as we can, and we'll reach out and try to do that. And whether it's a blog post we work on later on or something to that effect, because it's just such an interesting topic and so many really interesting questions came around that we get time to work on everything. So apologies if we missed yours. If you have any questions for us, feel free to reach out to BuzzSumo anytime. Reach us in that chat box. You can reach us at help@buzzsumo.com. And make sure you go and check out our blog on buzzsumo.com, but also all Brian's amazing work at Backlinko, exploring topics.
All right. Thanks, Evan. Thanks, guys. Nice seeing you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for coming. Bye. Hey, what's up, everybody? Brian Dean here. And in this video, I'm going to answer some questions that we didn't have a chance to get to on the webinar. So we have a lot of questions, so I'm going to go pretty rapid fire through these, but I'll make sure to answer every single one. So first question, when you update content, do you change the date on the post, or does Google recognize that it's been updated? So I do change the date on the post. I think that Google can probably see that it's been updated, right? Because they have cached versions from the past, so they can tell. But just to be more clear for Google end users, I do change the date when I make a significant update. If I just go in and change something small, I don't change the date. But if I make a real update, then I do make sure to change the date on the post. So second question, what is the word to visual ratio? That's something I don't really worry about because it depends on the content and what the point of the content is and who you're serving with it. So if you're creating a piece of content that, is a lot of stats, in that case, you probably want a lot of visuals. But if it's more of a story or some other thing, you might want more text. So it's not something I really worry about or pay attention to. Next question, how can you get your content noticed given the very high quality and quantity of content across many B2B industries? Very good question. I'm in B2B, so I can relate to this. And it's a tough question to answer in sort of this format because it's something that requires like an in-depth video or even a course on how to do it. But one of the keys is to do do the opposite of what everyone else is doing in your space. So, there's like this arms race for quality content, longer content, more in-depth content, putting out more content. That's the quantity you're referring to. How can you do something different that no one else is doing in your specific B2B niche? So in my case, when I first started in the SEO space, I was competing against these massive sites like Moz and Search Engine Land and Search Engine Journal. So it was tough because I was just getting started, and these were these established B2B players who had massive staffs, writing staffs, and all that stuff. So I was like, what can I do that's the opposite? Well, everyone in my space was publishing sort of generic list posts. There were like 10 ways to do this, 11 ways to do that. And no one was really speaking from their personal experience and sharing really in-depth case studies at that time. So when I came out, I was like, well, I'm just going to share all the stuff that's working for me, what's not working for me, and make it a little bit more of like a journal and a personal thing. So that's something I would look into. Is there someone on your staff where you can share some things that you guys are doing that no one else is publishing? So maybe you decrease your churn rate in half. How'd you do that? That's going to be much more powerful than 10 ways to reduce your churn rate, because everyone's going to put that out. Then someone's going to put 20 ways to reduce your churn rate. Then someone's going to write 30 ways. But you can have something unique by saying, this is what's working for us. So next question, what about including the year in the URL or date? I don't recommend doing that because it just makes your content less evergreen, right? So if you have a date in there and then you go back and change it for 2021, it's going to look a little out of date. It's not a big deal. Most people don't even look at the URL, but just for the sake of just usability, it doesn't really add anything by having it in the URL, and it makes it harder to keep your content up to date. So is evergreen content also about images or just written content? It's about both, actually. That's a really good question. It's about both. So for the most part, you're changing written content when you're trying to make it evergreen. But if you have a lot of images in a piece of content, then it can make sense to update them. So let's say you have a chart for social media usage from 2015 to 2018. Well, that image is now not evergreen. It's kind of out of date, but you can go back and you can update it. Or say you have, on the other hand, you want to create something evergreen from scratch, like a chart or a flow chart on how to do something that can actually stand the test of time for years or decades, depending on what it is. Next question. What is your opinion on opinion-based articles? My opinion is that I don't like them for the most part. I mean, the reason I don't is because unless you're a huge, successful person, no one cares about your opinion. Like if I'm going to read someone's opinion, it has to be like Elon Musk, Tim Ferriss, Marie Forleo, Sarah Blakely, someone like that who is like a successful, established person who has gone through the trenches and has something to share. And I'm not alone. Now, not to say someone who's not super successful, they have stuff to share too, right? They have their life experience, they have things they've accomplished already. I'm not saying those people, their opinion isn't worthwhile. It's just that I have so much time in the day. I'm only going to read an opinion piece if it's from someone that I already know and respect. I'm not going to read an opinion piece by some random person. And so that's why I don't like them. That's why I actually don't publish them myself. Like I include my opinion sometimes, but I don't write these long posts or newsletters that are like, here's my opinion about X, because honestly, people don't really care that much. They just want an outcome. And if you can help them get from point A to point B, you're going to be much more successful than publishing opinion pieces. Okay, next question. How can you write SEO-friendly evergreen content? Well, it's not any different than writing any other content, right? Like you still need to optimize it the same way. You need to choose keywords. You need to build links to it. It's all the same stuff. The only difference with evergreen is that either from the start, you're like, I want this to last years, or you're looking at it as a project that you can update over time. So that's the two ways we talked about in the webinar on how to create evergreen content. One is on day one, saying this thing will just stand the test of time. So if it's about how to do a pull-up, it's probably not going to change in 10 years. So that's something that's going to be evergreen from the start. But if you're publishing the best CRM software, that's something that could change within 6 months to a year. So you might need to update it. Okay, next question. How can existing evergreen content inspire new topics? Asking from the perspective of a YouTube channel where it's not possible to update the content. It's a really good question. So you really have to do what you're doing. Like you can't update it. So you need to use your existing evergreen content and then build off of that. So what I like to do with my YouTube channel is look at comments and see what people have left on videos and what questions they have about what's missing. And then I create content around that, because those are usually topics that I didn't cover in the video. So the video is weak in that way. And maybe it requires a new video that I can just redo that one and add that piece and maybe update it a little bit and republish the video, or I can create a whole new video about that question that people have. So with YouTube, it's a little bit trickier because, like you said, you can't update, but it is important to do as much as you can to keep things fresh on there. So any more tips on structuring titles, subheadings, etc. in terms of keywords and phrases to increase the evergreen score and engagement? That's not really directly related to evergreen score, but obviously it is to engagement, right? So what I recommend is, when in doubt, add more subtitles and more subheadings. And I recommend paying special attention to subheadings that are going to stop someone from scrolling. I call those scroll stoppers. So how people really read an article online is they scroll and skim, and you want to stop them in their tracks. So your subheader should be a way to organize the content, but it needs to also grab people's attention. So if the subheaders are kind of dry, it's not really going to stop someone in their tracks. For example, let's say you're writing, 10 ways to improve your bench press. And then you can make number 5, like, avoid this, common mistake. That way they're going to be more likely to stop and read that step, as opposed to a step 5, keep your elbows in, or something like that. So not to say you need to do that for every article, but it's something to keep in mind as you write subheaders, as you write to make them compelling and not just descriptive. Ideally, you would do both. Next question. When first getting started, do you recommend posting content on a site like Medium first and then on my blog? No, absolutely not. I recommend starting on your blog first. That's a platform you own, you're building, you control. If you write on Medium, you have no idea how it's going to do, whether it's going to get in front of people. And frankly, people don't really browse Medium that much, so it's not really a platform like YouTube where it's going to help your content get discovered all that much. So yeah, I definitely recommend in your own blog. The only exceptions to that is you might want to post content on a guest post for another site. Like, say you're in the content marketing post in the content marketing space, guest posting on a site like BuzzSumo would be great, because that's going to get you in front of people that are in your niche. It's a well-read, well-respected blog, and you get a link back to your site. So that's something I would consider, but I wouldn't do Medium. All right, here we go. Next question. It's common that in niche industries, when doing keyword research, you get the impression that keywords aren't worth working on because they have low search volume. What is your experience with this? So I have a lot of experience with this, and I say 2 things to that. It's a good question. It's something that I've run into a lot myself. First is, those search volume estimates in the tools are not 100% accurate. Especially for very niche searches, a lot of times they underestimate how many people search for them. So sometimes you'll see a search volume of like 10, and really it's more like 100. And you might say, well, what's the difference? It's only 90 a month, but that's 10 times more. And if you're in a very niche space where someone's searching for like a machine that they use in a factory where every customer is worth like 50 grand, that's a big difference. So I usually don't pay any attention to that. If I see some search volume on a keyword and I think it's a great fit for what I sell, then I'll still go for the keyword even if it has low search volume, because also you can rank for other keywords too. It's not like you can only rank for that one keyword. You can rank for dozens or hundreds or even thousands of keywords. So yeah, I usually don't pay a ton of attention to search volume. Obviously, if it has more, it's better. But if one has like 50 or 10 or 20 sometimes, if it's a really good fit, I'll still go for it. Next question. If you update your content date, are you penalized by Google? No. So I haven't done a lot of experimenting, like just randomly changing the date without actually updating the content. But I prefer not to poke the bear. So I usually follow a rule where if I really update it, I change the date. Otherwise, I don't. Okay, next question. I work in the healthcare industry and people want trending real numbers. However, there are health topics that are evergreen, like how to properly store my medicine in the heat, which is one of the top performing pieces of content. Trying to differentiate with things have changed with the pandemic. Any advice? That's a good question. So yeah, most health topics have changed a little bit, but like you said, there are a lot that haven't. So I would put them into different buckets, and I would say like how to properly store my medicine in the heat. That'll always pretty much stay the same. And there's probably lots of others that you may be surprised aren't affected by the pandemic. Even fitness stuff. Yes, you can say, well, you're going to be working out at home more, but things are starting to open up. And if you're looking towards the future and going back and updating your content, I wouldn't update. I would try to include the pandemic as little as possible because it's fortunately going by the wayside now. So it's, hopefully in 6 months to a year, by not having that in there, you'll actually have more up to date stuff than the people that are really focused on the pandemic. So that's what I would recommend. I would put it into two buckets and only include pandemic related stuff if it absolutely relates to that topic. Otherwise, I wouldn't. It may not, over the next 3 months or so, it may not be ideal, but as things open up, people are going to want to move past it and read about the next thing. And that's going to include what's happening after the pandemic. So, next question: how to create the best evergreen and trending content in a niche industry or segment? Now, that's a little broad of a question, so it's a tough one to answer. But in general, evergreen and trending they're really two different types of content, and they usually don't work well together, because if you're going after a real, like a fad, a thing that's going to happen, it goes up and down, and you live and die by that. News sites live and die by that, and they do fine. So it's not that one's better than the other, but you need to, again, put your content into two buckets. These are trending stuff. I want just a spike in traffic, and I understand it's going to go to pretty much a zero after that. And then I have evergreen stuff, and that's more for the long term. It may not get that spike, but in over months and years, it's going to drip, drip, drip traffic in. So next question: does your skyscraper technique still work? Does content length matter? So yes, it does still work. I still use it, and I've seen other people use it and have success with it. So for those that don't know, the skyscraper technique is a 3-step process that I developed many years ago that basically is: you look at what's out there, especially what's ranking in Google on a topic, you create something better, and then you promote that content. So the reason that that works is because you're basing your content on an existing framework as opposed to starting from scratch. So let's say you wanted to create a piece of content about how to grow tomatoes. You could just completely open a blank page and just start from there. The problem is you're not building on something that actually works. But if you look at the top 10 results and they look pretty weak, then you're like, I can just take this stuff that's already working and improve upon it. So like I answered in the other question, in the B2B space, in certain topics, it's not possible because those keywords are already pretty much tapped out, right? Like everything's already 100 ways to do this. It doesn't make sense to go above that. In that sense, it makes sense to do something different. But in a lot of niches and a lot of topics, even in B2B, there are just topics that haven't been covered that well, and you have the potential to do better. So does content length matter? I would say, yeah, a little bit in general, across when it comes to social shares, when it comes to links, when it comes to ranking. Longer content does tend to perform better, but it's not that big of a difference. It's not about creating longer content. It's about creating better content. And that's what the skyscraper technique is all about. Yes, a lot of times it is publishing longer stuff, but sometimes you're just adding more visuals. You're creating something that's more up to date. You're making it more readable and just improving it in other ways. Okay, next question. When we have to write an article regarding a service or product we don't know yet, what is the best methodology to follow to get a quality article in the fastest period of time? At minimum, how many articles are required to read so you have a pretty good insight? That's really hard to say because it depends so much on what you're talking about, because a service or product could be two different things. Like this product could be like a piece of software, or it could be like a shovel. It's hard to say. But in general, I find that especially now, people are a little bit, they can kind of tell when your content is secondhand, as I call it, where you just read what's out there and then regurgitate it. And people do okay with that sometimes, but more and more searchers are sophisticated and they want firsthand experience. Like I just got a new laptop, and when I was reading articles on reviews and things of that nature, I noticed that I could notice right away if someone actually used a laptop or not, and someone was just, BSing. So I would recommend, if possible, to use the service, to use the product, even if it's just a trial. You're going to have so much more rich content, meaty content that is going to do the best over time, even though it requires an upfront time investment to actually use it. All right, last question of the main questions, then we can see if we can get into some others. How can you make outstanding content if everyone else is making content about the same trending topic that you're writing about? That's a really good question. So there's two ways to do it. Like I mentioned before, I would try to not get so much into the outstanding arms race and think, what can I do that's different about this trending topic? If everyone's just doing the same stuff and they're just making it longer and slightly better, how can you do something totally different? The other is, can you go can you go after a different trend that's a little less tapped? So if everyone is writing about this trending topic, it's just going to be hard to stand out. Like even me, I run a site that's one of the most popular marketing blogs online. And even I look for trending topics that no one's writing about just because it's so much easier to get traction with. I tend to avoid topics that are already tapped out. Okay, so let's get into these pretty niche questions before I wrap things up. I work for a restaurant group. How would a restaurant or restaurants in general create evergreen content? That's a good question. So, what I would do is look for keywords and topics that your potential customers are searching for when they're not looking for a restaurant. So, obviously, nutrition facts about the dishes that you serve, but also some other topics related to food, related to recipes. So, like, let's say you have a Creole restaurant. People searching for Creole recipes are very likely to visit your restaurant because they're into that, right? So, one of the hardest parts of keyword research is how do I find these keywords that customers are searching for when they're not searching for me? And those are actually the most lucrative keywords because there's more of them. Like someone's going to search for like restaurant Boston or like Creole restaurant Boston once, and they're going to search for a bunch of other keywords thousands of times. And those are opportunity to get in front of them. So it's hard for me to say without looking at your niche. I need to know a little bit more about your restaurant. Is it fine dining? Is it fast casual? And that would dictate who these people are and how to get in front of them. There's another question that's similar to a niche. It depends. The key is really to say, what are the keywords that my customers are searching for when they're searching for me, and get landing pages around all of those. And then the next is, how do you find keywords that they're searching for when they're not searching for what you sell? So in my case, I sell for Backlinko SEO courses and online marketing courses, but all my content's not like 5 ways to choose an online marketing course or online marketing course about SEO. Most of my content are keywords that are targeting keywords that my customers search for when they're not searching for a course, like on-page SEO, link building, how to start an SEO campaign, how to build links to your site. These are things that my customers are searching for. They don't even want a course. They don't even know they want a course right now, but I'm getting in front of the same people earlier on. Then you get them on an email list, and then the rest is sort of outside the realm of this discussion. But the point is that I would look more at content that's not directly related to what you sell. BuzzSumo does an awesome job of this too. They have tons of content on their site that's not about content marketing tools or how to use their tool. They have that too, but a good chunk of it is just educating people on content marketing, and that way BuzzSumo is top of mind when they want to invest in a content marketing tool. So yeah, I hope you found this rapid fire Q&A session helpful, and I'll talk to you later.